It's thought that sickle cell anemia originated in West Africa. I say thought because now there's some research pointing that it may also have developed in East Africa. But as far as we know, sickle cell anemia developed in West Africa a few thousand years ago. Apparently the farmers who cultivated yams are the basic food staple of the people of West Africa. They learned a new technique that was able them to grow yams all year round. And what it was called was the burn and slash technique. And they went into the jungles and cleared these jungles using this technique. But what it did was put them in contact with mosquitoes, malaria-carrying mosquitoes. So of course people began to catch malaria. After the period of time, in order for people's bodies to adapt to it, the body dropped one of the chromosomes that make up the amino acids that makes up the structure of red blood corpuscles. And it was the particular ingredient that affects the hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin is the ingredient that, of course, carries oxygen to the blood. Now, what happened when they dropped this, a person then had sickle cell trait. A person who had sickle cell trait had no symptoms whatsoever of sickle cell anemia. And the trait made them immune to malaria. So actually it was the body's defense against the malaria-carrying mosquitoes that developed SA trait or sickle cell trait. But as time went on, the people with sickle cell trait began to outlive the people who didn't have sickle cell trait, because these people, of course, caught malaria, and died. So more and more of the population had the trait, and as a result, more and more couples that came together began to have children with sickle cell disease. Now, a person with the disease had two things to deal with. They had a disease, and they were no longer immune to malaria. So sickle cell trait served a purpose, and it served a good purpose, because it helped people to survive in this alien environment. Of course, having sickle cell trait serves no purpose whatsoever here in the United States. Now, it's been found that through the travel routes to the East, the Middle East, the Far East, to Saudi Arabia, to even Italy and Greece, that you can now find sickle cell trait and sickle cell disease. So the disease spread with the migration of black people and the trade routes of black people. And of course, when blacks were brought across the Middle Passage during slavery, sickle cell anemia came with them. Well, I think a lot more is understood now about sickle cell anemia. Of course, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. It's kind of funny because researchers say that no disease is as well understood as sickle cell anemia is. The problem is just finding those right ingredients that can either cure the illness or at least reduce its harmful effects. I was told that over 50 ingredients have been found that stop sickling in a blood test tube, but the problem is when you put it in the human body, then you have problems of toxicity, or this poisonous or other kinds of reactions. I think that because antibiotics have gotten better, because certain surgeries have gotten better, that now sicklers are living longer than they have in the past. I think that also increases other kinds of problems. The fact that you live longer means, of course, that there's more things that can go wrong. So you have to worry about the development of other kinds of secondary problems, such as, in my case, having to have the total hip replacements, or the breakdown of the total femur head, or the total right shoulder replacement, or the retina reattachment I've had on my right eye. These are all secondary problems that develop from the disease. I think, of course, as time goes on, as more research, hopefully other things will be found out. One of the other things I think that's improved, and a lot of people don't talk about it, is the whole economical problem of dealing with this illness. When I was a child, my parents literally had to pay for everything, and to say the least, it was very hard on my parents. I mean, they had two children with a disease, who were constantly in and out of the hospital, who needed constant medical attention, who needed constant medications, and hospital bills do add up. But I think now there are programs that make it available for people through Medicaid to at least get help financially. Same thing for the adult sickler who's having problem reaching or dealing with the medical bills, that there are mechanisms so that you can get some relief in dealing with the bills. During the 60s, when more information was coming out about sickle cell anemia, and more black people were demanding that testing centers be set up and that testing be done in the schools, that many people became afraid of a backlash, especially in certain kinds of jobs in the armed forces, where people felt that people with the sickle cell trait would be discriminated against. So people with the trait had a very real fear. And as a result of that, the black community really became split on its approach to dealing with sickle cell anemia. And I think a lot of times sickle cell has been a political football that's been kicked around. You'll have one set of politicians who promise more funds and more research, and then they come and they go, and nothing has changed. And it's really taken years to finally get people to understand the situation and for monies to be made available. The problem of the medications, or the problems of drugs, is a twofold problem. As I said, I think a lot more is understood now about the disease, is understood more about the pain, and understood more about the long-term effects of both the illness and certain medications. In New York, and even in my sickle cell group, we try to encourage doctors and parents to hold off on all kinds of strong, hard narcotic medications for children and young sicklers for as long as possible. And that we've been finding that some children can go all the way to adulthood on pretty mild medications. I mean, there may be times where they require a very, very strong medication, and they should get it for that period of time and in that period alone. In doing that, I think a person is able to function and to live a pretty normal life. I think in the past, when you go back 30 years or more, people weren't really aware, I think, of the long-term problems, both of the disease and of the medication. A doctor saw a child in agony in front of them. What did they want to do? They wanted to stop the pain. What did the child want? To stop the pain. What did the family want? You know, to stop the pain. And they used what they had available. And a lot of times it was pain medications that were made of narcotic drugs. And over a period of time, there can be problems. But what must be understood is that with most sicklers, the amount of pain medication they take is directly related to the amount of pain they have. In other words, there are sicklers who come in crises, and very, very bad crises, that have a very high tolerance to the pain medications. But the moment the pain comes down, you also notice that the requirement of the medication comes down also. It's a direct result. And there's been a lot of talk about sickle cell anemia and talk about drug addiction. And over the years, as long as I've had the disease and through my group, we've only known 3 sicklers who ever used outside drugs. And in each case, they were using outside drugs as a means of treatment, not for the euphoria of using narcotics. And of course, all 3 of them paid dearly with their lives. But it was linked totally to the problem of pain management. And that's the real problem, pain management. And I think that people are beginning to try to explore new kinds of things, from hypnotism to biofeedback and other kinds of things. And I think all of them are valuable. Another thing that's being developed, and have been using it, is acupuncture. We have a lot of hope that acupuncture will one day actually be accepted in the hospitals and be used as our prevention for pain. But for many older sicklers, my age, 39, 40, we came up during the period of having to use very strong narcotics. So for us, it's very hard when we come in the hospital in a very bad crisis. Our tolerance is very high. And unless you have doctors or a staff who understand the situation and understand who you are, it could run into a lot of problems. I think one of the reasons also for this, and it has to be looked at, is the whole problem of drug addiction per se in the black community. And I think you have many doctors who come into these central city hospitals who really know very little about drug addiction. And what they do know, they've read out of some book. So anybody that comes walking in requiring Demerol or morphine or Dilaudid, first thing that runs through their mind is drug addiction. And it's been my experience that many of them wouldn't know what drug addiction if they crashed into them, know a drug addict if they crashed into them. So I think it has to be a real education has to be done to doctors and to parents and to patients. Sickle cell has been a political football that for a long time I think has been kicked around, but I do think that at this stage of the game that there are monies being spent, there is research being done. Of course, it's never enough, and a lot more money needs to be spent. Also, money needs to be spent on developing educational tools to teaching people about the disease, especially third world people. I mean, black, Latin American, people from the Middle East. These people need to be educated to the fact that they possibly have sickle cell trait and therefore could have a child with sickle cell anemia. I think, again, through the group that I'm associated with at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, we're attempting to do that, but I think it also has to be done on local and state and even national level, because it's one of, when we talk about the problems facing minorities, black Americans and Latin Americans, sickle cell anemia is definitely, should be a priority of, in terms of it being a problem facing our people. I think that the work that had been started in the 60s had been started by black political organizations like the Panthers or RAM or other organizations, the Nation of Islam, which tried to bring some education about the illness and try to give some understanding, and also to try and put it in historical context so that children who have the trait don't see it in a purely negative aspect. I think that's very important. I think a child finds out they have sickle cell trait, or a young person finds that out, and it can be very, very scary, and you can have strange thoughts, and I think those things have to be dealt with. And of course, the child with sickle cell anemia, with the disease, special attention has to be paid to that child so that it grows up with a positive image, a positive self-image, and realizing that yes, he or she may have a handicap, but that with the will and with the mind and with the strength and the education, that they could accomplish anything that they want. And I think that's very important. And that's one of the main things that we try to put forth in our organization, SCOSH, Sickle Cell Organization for Self-Help, is that in our organization, as I said, we have teachers, we have a filmmaker, I'm an artist, we have a grandmother who's the president of our group, and a very young grandmother, and we try to give a positive image to children with the disease. When I was growing up, I didn't know any older sicklers. All the sicklers I knew were basically my age or a little younger, and I never got a chance to meet any adult sicklers. I think that if I had very early, that it probably could have helped me through some of the self-doubts and things that I may have gone through later, even if only to show me that you can live with the disease, that you can live into adulthood, that you can pursue dreams, that you can make a life for yourself. My brother died when I was 5 years old. I was 7 at the time, and I truly believed that I would not live to be 18 or live to be 21. But at this stage of the game, of course, I've learned that it's hard to put numbers on those kind of things. And I think in terms of my own survival, that it's due to a number of things. I think I was very fortunate, as I said. I had very strong parents, and I had a very strong family base around me, which was important. I was always lucky. I always had very good doctors and went to good hospitals and had good nurses who really worked and got concerned and interested in me, not just as a patient, but as a person. And I think that's very important. I think that any chance a doctor can have to reach a patient and take it beyond just purely that illness relationship should do so, and that it does help. It serves a purpose. I think many doctors are so quick nowadays to, or because they're so busy, that they kind of lose touch with that, and I think that's sad, and I think it's bad for not just the patient but for the doctor also. As I was growing up as a child, because I had this illness, I learned very quickly that there was a lot of things I could not do. I tried it, you know, I would try sports or go after things, but I learned that I could not do it. That if I didn't get sick, I just didn't have the strength or the will to be able to do this. So I had to learn other things, and I was fortunate that I had people around me that opened up other things for me. So, as I said, music became important to me. Literature became important to me. Very early, I was interested in history and black history and black culture. I learned about Marcus Garvey very early. I was 10 years old when I had the honor of meeting Malcolm X. By the time I was 18, I had met Muhammad Ahmed, also known as Max Stanford, and through these black men, of course, it helped me to identify and to develop my own person. And I think my involvement in the black struggle has played an important part in my life, becoming a community activist, becoming a community organizer. In the early 1960s, I helped organize the first Black Panther Party outside of Lawrence County, Alabama, where the party had begun. And the very first one was organized in Harlem. From there, I became interested in many other things. I worked with Jesse Gray and his Backstreet Youth in Harlem. I taught for a while at a street academy. I was able to take 5 students to Africa on a research trip. Taught black studies for a couple of years at Northeastern University and then Tufts University. Because of my health, I have not been able to teach in the last few years, though I do lecture. But I'm an artist, full-time artist, and I live by my art. I maintain my own studio in New York. But I think all of these past experiences have helped me to build and to develop myself and my attitudes toward the illness. I was in Africa in 1968. I was in Ghana, in West Africa. And while I was there, I got sick. And of course, I thought that was going to ruin my trip. I wound up spending 5 days in the hospital, and it's the greatest 5 days I ever spent in any hospital because of what I learned while I was there. I was on a floor that was designed just for sickle cell patients. And it was a totally brand new hospital with all the latest equipment. And I found out that in Africa, that definitely research was going on. One of the things that was being done was that many of the doctors were going out into the backlands or to the bush and beginning to test and try to put a topography together of where the sickle cell trait was most prominent and try to figure out how the disease moved across Africa. They were also doing research on something called the true root, which is a common root that people use to clean their teeth with. And there was something that was found in the true root that they found could stop sickling in a test tube. But again, the trick is getting inside the human body. So these kind of things are still being worked on. Sickle cell anemia is very important in West Africa. After the 5 days I was there, I was shocked when I left to not receive a hospital bill, and I was told that sickle cell anemia, because it was so important there, that no sickle cell patient was ever charged in their hospitals. So that was a totally new experience. But yeah, there's research going, and not just in Africa. There's research also going in Asia, primarily Japan, and of course here in America. And I think these different countries are trying to hook up their different findings and trying to coordinate and work together. It's two kind of things happening. On the one hand, it's very good because the more activity you have, the more organizations you have, the more activity you have, the more information that gets out, and the more people that are reached. And I think that's positive. What can be bad a lot of times is that you have all these different forces out there going their own way. And I think there has to be some kind of concerted effort to kind of move together, or at least not having people repeating each other's services and repeating each other's mistakes. Also in the past, that there has been problems with certain organizations that have raised money for sickle cell anemia, and after the affair, whatever was over, the money never reached any research program or any patients with sickle cell. I mean, no one doesn't know what happened to the funds. What I would say to any listener who wants to donate money or donate any kind of services to help sickle cell anemia is that they look for a good, viable sickle cell organization, either in their community or at least in their state, and that they be very sure that this disease, be very sure that this organization is who they say they are, and that they're doing what they say that they're doing. I think that there has to be also more involvement of patients with sickle cell anemia. In the past, I think it was always a lot of other people. I mean, and that's good. We need these other people. But I think it was always this attitude, oh, the poor sicklers, and they went ahead and organized and formed and did things. And a lot of times, sicklers were never involved. I think, though, that is changing. The group I'm in was one of the first groups on the East Coast to form. We understand now that there are self-help groups forming all across the country, in California and in the Midwest, and we're working to try to hook up with these people. One of the things we want to do is create a self-help register, and that would be a register of all sickle cell organizations. You are unique, and that you are a special person, and that there's nobody else anywhere on the planet like you are. And that goes for every other individual. We each come in with our own particular gifts. You have to try to find and develop yours. Sickle cell anemia does not take away from who you are or what you can be. I think the basic thing I want to say is that you have to dare to struggle and dare to win. And the only thing that can hold you back is yourself. And half the battle is mental. If you yourself believe that you can accomplish something, then there's nothing that can stop you. So I would just say to any person, any child with sickle cell anemia, just keep on keeping on.